Welcome back to this week's edition of the Field of 68 Mid-Major Top 25 show. I am joined by Rocco Miller once again. And Rocco, I'm just going to kick it off right away. You were in Salt Lake for Loyola Chicago against San Francisco. That was kind of an impromptu matchup added on short notice. What was that whole game like, and what was that experience like being there between two high-level mid-major squads?
Well, first off, it was unbelievably lucky for me. I happened to be in Utah regardless for the week. I had planned on covering Utah State, Boise State, which would have been a pretty good Mountain West game on Tuesday. Unfortunately, Boise State went on a pause, so that game didn't happen. I had some friends in the area, so I was going to hang out with them while they skied. I don't ski, I just do basketball. So then all of a sudden, Tuesday night, I think it was, or maybe it was Tuesday afternoon, it came together. And I know the Dawn staff pretty closely. I was helping with them try to find an opponent. Loyola had reached out to them. So hats off, first of all, to Loyola. They're the team that's been to the Final Four, to the Sweet 16. They played in Atlantis. They did well enough. Right now, they're in a position where if they didn't play San Francisco, they would probably be okay with a couple Valley losses, and their metrics would carry them into the tournament. So Drew Valentine, hats off to them to play in the game. And then, so of course, as soon as it was announced, I said I was going. And when I got there, they had it at Salt Lake Community College, which is home to the G League Stars, which I didn't really realize till I got there. So the cool thing about it was the acoustics and the video boards and the national anthem and all that stuff was like better than most D1 schools I go to. And the arena was like 5,000 seats, probably bigger than like Gonzaga's Kennel or Duke's Cameron Indoor. So all of that was definitely set up for a D1 experience. And, if we're going to be in this COVID world for quite a bit longer, maybe into next season, they should consider this place. Because, I mean, how many conferences are out here in the West and in the Central where that's a really easy meeting place? You think about like the Salt Lake Airport with the Delta Hub. You could get in there from basically anywhere in the United States. So what a great place to do a true neutral game if you have to do it. The game itself, of course, was back and forth seesaw. I thought both teams did some really interesting things. Loyola Chicago was extremely successful at getting their bigs to go wide, basically play on the perimeter to open up things for guys like Marquise Kennedy to penetrate. I mean, he's basically just backing down Khalil Shabazz for easy baskets. And it was like Loyola Chicago just looked at it and said, hey, our guards are bigger than yours, even though San Francisco's guards are very talented. They didn't have an answer for that, and they didn't have a really easy way to double them either. So that ended up resulting in some really key baskets. Loyola Chicago built a 9-point lead with about 3.5 minutes to go when Shabazz fouled out, and it looked like that was the breaking point. And one of the things that impressed me the most was Yauhen Mosalski. Because there was limited fans, you could hear everything, coaches, players, regardless. And Mosalski just yells out, like, echoing through the gym, we're not done, we didn't come here to lose. And this is like, and we're just like, okay, this is cool. So definitely not something you would get at a normal game. Obviously, if this game was at either location, it would have been packed and loud. The Dons rallied after that, cut it back down to a couple points. And unfortunately, at the end for the Dons, a loose ball got out and a dunk happened on the other end, and that sealed it for the Ramblers. After the game was over, both coaches spent a lot of time with us, talked to us about the experience. It's just really cool. Ken Pomeroy was there, so I got to chat with him. That was the first time I talked to him. So yeah, the whole thing was just an amazing experience. I wish it could happen more often, and just glad I was in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and with that being said, I mean, that was a huge game, but now let's get into your three headlines from the week.
Yeah, so my three headlines, Sean, for this week, I'm going, first of all, we got to talk just a little bit about what happened in Springfield, Missouri over the weekend. A classic game between Northern Iowa and Missouri State. Now, when I say classic, I mean maybe in the sense of the Valley, because the Valley just always has these unbelievable conference matchups, and it's getting started early this year. Loyola Chicago had one themselves, in fact, that day. But Northern Iowa, AJ Green went for 33. 7 of his baskets were inside the arc. Missouri State did a really good job actually defending the perimeter. Northern Iowa only shot 20%. But the real story is on the other end, where Isaiah Mosley just got anything and everything, made 11 twos, went 5 for 10 from three, ended up with 43 points, one of the highest individual scoring games of the year anywhere in college basketball.
Mm-hmm.
So to have a player from each side go for 43 and 33 in a 40-minute game, you have to appreciate that. Northern Iowa won by one. Great road win for them as they're trying to regroup and start a successful conference campaign after a tough non-conference campaign. I think that's a immediate early headline for me. What do you got for your top headline, Sean?
Well, I'll kick it off here and say, Rice going and beating UAB. That's a team that was hurt early in the season. They had some injuries that limited what they can do. And then they had a COVID pause. So that hurt Rice when they were starting to get things rolling. And then they go and beat UAB, who's the favorite at the moment in Conference USA. That definitely hurts UAB's at-large bid potential. I still think they have a small window to maybe do it, but Rice is able to get the win, and they're one of the more efficient offenses, if not the most efficient offense in Conference USA. They play four guys that are 6'4" or smaller. Carl Pierre, the UMass transfer, he's been huge for them this year. Quincy Olivari hasn't gotten it going quite the same way he did last year, but once he gets it rolling, Rice becomes even more dangerous. Travis Evie at 24 points, and then Max Fiedler, their five-man, he's just a tremendous passer. He doesn't have the biggest stats in the world, but his impact is very, very important. So Rice isn't a team I'd want to face in the CUSA tournament because they can outscore everybody. They don't defend particularly well, but they can outscore you. That's for sure.
That's a great call, Sean. For my second headline, I think we're at this really crucial, transition in the season where we're transitioning away from non-conference into conference. Now, of course, we still got some opportunities here and there if there's COVID cancellations like we got with Loyola Chicago, San Francisco. But by and large, we are fully moving on to conference play at this point. And I think that is where it's important to address the multi-bid opportunities that exist. And I think this year, there's more than a typical year. And I think a lot of that has to do with what goes on in the power conferences. So because the Pac-12 and ACC was a little disappointing in the non-conference, the window is there for some leagues to pick up multiple bids than that may have expected before the year. So the ones that are out there right now, of course, are the Missouri Valley with Loyola Chicago being a team that looks really solidified as a tournament team, barring a few slip-ups along the way here in the last 2 months. You also have the Belmont Bruins who are in position along with Murray State, which, either way, they both are in play for an at-large bid. If one of them continues to win or maybe gets a sweep over the other, that's going to be a situation where if that particular team on top doesn't win the conference tournament, that's a two-bid situation. Then you look at the MAC, where Iona unfortunately fell to St. Louis on Saturday in a real tight loss on short notice. I'd hope the committee doesn't hold that too strongly against them. But the reality is Iona's got a lot of work to do in the MAC, and they have a lot of tough road games and tough environments to win in. But as it stands today, that's in play for a two bid. And I also think the WAC is not completely out of it. New Mexico State's got a win over Davidson. They got some other nice wins. If they can, and the WAC's got a good chunk of teams in the top 100 to 150 range, where you pick up some of those wins on the road, it actually makes a difference for your at-large opportunities. So I think the WAC's still in play as well. You look at Conference USA. I mean, you talk about it almost every week, Sean. 4 bona fide teams where you're not going to really get hurt by losing to them unless it's on your home court, between UAB, La Tech, North Texas, and Western Kentucky. And you got other teams in there like Rice that can knock you off. So definitely an opportunity to get two bids there. So, and the list goes on. I think there's a couple others we could throw in there as well at this point.
Yeah, I'd put Chattanooga in the mix for sure.
Yeah, Chattanooga's still in the mix. Absolutely. So it's just a matter of, I think it's fun for us on the mid-major level to just think about all those possibilities. I want to take it back to the other side of the equation, which is the power conference level, where a lot of national media and storylines take away from, leagues like the ACC and Pac-12. But the reality is you can get a team like a Miami or a Wake Forest, or, even out here like a Colorado or a Stanford, where if they put some wins together, they're suddenly taking these spots away. So you can't take any of that stuff for granted. Everything changes week to week. And I think without looking at the entire landscape, you could be fooling yourself a little bit. And I just think quality wise, especially with the portal and the extra COVID year, certainly, we're looking at like 50 to 60 quality teams when they're full strength. And there's only going to be about, top 48 or so are going to get in.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. And another headline that I want to touch on, the Princeton Tigers aren't in the poll yet. I will spoil that. They are not ranked yet, but I think they will be here very soon because this is a team that if they're a 12, 13, 14 seed, I think they could win a game or two in the tournament because they have what it takes. They don't turn the ball over. They're one of the best turnover-free teams in the country. They're 13th nationally in effective field goal percentage. Kosan Iwoma, the sophomore or junior big man, however you want to call that, the Ivy League didn't play last year, so that makes it even more difficult. He's in his second year, but he's fantastic, averaging 14 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, 5 assists per game. He just fills up the stat sheet every single game and is tough to defend in that Princeton offense because he can put the ball on the floor with his ball handling ability and athleticism, and he can also make tremendous back cut passes or pass to an open shooter. And those shooters, they have 3 of the best shooters in the Ivy League. Jalen Llewellyn, a former 4-star recruit, he's really having a great year. He got hurt the other day, missed their next game against Cornell. We'll see when he's able to come back. Ethan Wright, he's been a knockdown shooter. Ryan Langborg, another top 10 shooter in the Ivy League, and Drew Freiberg is also a very reliable shooter. So when you have that shooting, that experience, that talent, this is a team that can win a game or two in the NCAA tournament. They're the clear team to beat in the Ivy. And obviously only 4 teams in the Ivy League tournament play. So they have not as many obstacles to get by compared to other teams in like Conference USA. They have a pretty clear path to get to the tournament. And we've already seen they can beat high major teams this year. They beat South Carolina in the Asheville Invitational. They lost by 7 in overtime to Minnesota, and they won at Oregon State. This is a team that can definitely win a game in the NCAA tournament.
I like that, Sean. And my third headline, I'll keep it pretty simple because I've touched on both of them earlier, is just looking ahead a little bit, a showdown between 2 of our, I think, top 10 teams, if not even higher. Murray State and Belmont, round 1 is coming up this Saturday. So I just want to plant the seed. This is a matchup where, Belmont is a team that really wants to get out and space you out and run and gun and make threes and get easy layups and just make things incredibly efficient and easy. This game's at Belmont. So if they dictate the pace, get the crowd behind them, they could run away with it if they get their preferred style of play. On the other side, Murray State, they'll take their time to get a good shot. They're tenacious offensive rebounders, almost like a poor man's Houston in a way. The 19th in the nation offensive rebound percentage, that definitely jumps off the page for an Ohio Valley Conference team. They can shoot the lights out from deep. So, both these teams can shoot. So it's going to be pretty fascinating to see how they, the game within the game, right? Where the coaches are going to mix it up, and we'll see how that plays out in round 1 and how it affects round 2 when they go to Murray State later this year. Super excited to watch that game. It's coming up 5:00 Eastern time on Saturday.
Yeah, I would venture to say we'll probably get 3 matchups between these 2 teams this year, assuming they meet in the Ohio Valley Conference tournament. That just seems like a very likely scenario at this point. And I would tune into every single one of those games because they're always within a possession or 2. They're never blowouts. They're always close. And you think about a few years back, that backdoor layup that won Belmont the game, the NCAA tournament didn't end up happening, but that game happened still. So that is what it is, I guess. But that was a fun game for sure. But my third headline is going to be Max Abmas is just back to doing Max Abmas things in the Summit League. He had 38 points, 5 rebounds, and a career high 11 assists the other day on the road against Western Illinois, a Western Illinois team that started off really hot. It was an 87-86 victory for the Golden Eagles. If Max Abmas is going to keep playing like that, Oral Roberts could definitely win the Summit League tournament. Obviously, like last year, they were the 4th place team in the regular season. They go and get hot in the tournament. They win the tournament. They win 2 games in the NCAA tournament. They can do that again this year, get back to the NCAA tournament. And then Abmas against St. Thomas had 38 points. So he's just back to firing on all cylinders, and he's must-watch television every single time he plays when he's playing like this.
I agree, Sean. Is anybody in the Summit League going to play defense this year? That's my question.
I mean, hey, that's what makes the Summit League awesome. The scoring.
It really is. You just get entertained the entire time. Turn on any of those games.
Yeah, and now heading into the actual poll we'll talk about a little bit here. There are some changes. With San Francisco losing, they move down to number 3. Belmont moves up to number 2. So that's the first change we've seen in the top 2 in quite a few weeks here. Loyola Chicago remains number one, obviously, after beating San Francisco, but they also did have a very close call against Bradley. They were down by double digits with not a ton of time left, but they were able to send it to overtime and end up winning there. That's a very nice win for the Ramblers. And I'll talk to Loyola Chicago head coach Drew Valentine later in the show, so we'll discuss some of what happened in the San Francisco game and just what's different about this Ramblers team later. But then looking at some of the other changes in the top 10, UAB drops. They did win a game against North Texas, but then they also lost to Rice, so they drop a little bit there. And then looking at the teams who enter the poll, Towson is in the poll for the first time. They went 1-1 last week. Cameron Holden, he didn't end up missing any games, I'm pretty sure. He had a fractured jaw, played with like a mask over his jaw, and he's back to doing what he does because he's a big-time player for Towson. And then Liberty is back in the pool. They've been out for quite a few weeks, but they look like the team to beat in the Atlantic Sun once again because Darius McGee is one of the best players in the country. Keegan McDowell has really stepped up as a nice sidekick next to McGee. And Richie McKay just has a tremendous program going on at Liberty. So those are the real notable changes in the poll this week. What do you think about UAB, though? I touched on Rice earlier. What are your takeaways from what UAB did last week? Because it was a real up and down week.
Yeah, and I think, Sean, UAB is a team, and I've talked about this in the past. They're built to just run and gun and out athlete you from a depth perspective and from a starting five perspective. So when you get into a traditional non-conference schedule, UAB can host you or go on the road in a one-game setting, blow you off the court. I think where it gets really tough for UAB in league is you have these travel partners in Conference USA. And I think what we saw, and maybe it's not always going to be the second game, but maybe just conventional wisdom says it will be the second game. You bring that much gas to the floor, second game, you're going to probably experience some burnout. And look, I'm not in the locker room. I don't know how much of that actually happened against Rice, but they had a hard fought win at North Texas. And we both know nobody plays defense like North Texas in Conference USA. And that will grind you and eat at you and suck the life out of you to get that win. And UAB, you get that win. That's a darn good week. But then you got to go out and regroup. 2 days later, you got to travel from Dallas down to Houston and be ready to go against Rice. And, you're probably not going to have your A game. And I think when you look at future road trips, they're going to have a stretch where they got to go from Western Kentucky to Marshall. They're going to have a stretch when they go, I guess the other ones, they should be a little more manageable. I think this was the trickiest one just because you had to go North Texas in round one. But I think that's important because when you get into the conference tournament, you got to be ready to go every day. And if you are fortunate enough to get to the NCAA tournament, it basically sets up the same way. You're going to have your first round game, which maybe UAB is in good shape for, but are they going to have the gas left for the second game? Because you got to win 2 games in a weekend to get to the next weekend. So I think that's really important to start paying attention to as you're trying to forecast who's going to win a conference tournament, who's actually going to be able to advance in the NCAA tournament. And I think we're going to start seeing previews of this across a bunch of these leagues where we're scratching our head on how a team like UAB can lose to Rice, right?
Yeah, and I teased this earlier in the show. I did speak to Loyola Chicago head coach Drew Valentine, so now we'll get to that interview. Coach, so this is a question I wanted to ask you when I figured out you're coming on the show this week, and it's an interesting one because obviously you were on staff for the Final Four run a few years back with Loyola Chicago, and I wanted to know your thoughts between 3 shots that I think are the shots of your guys' run in the tournament. Clayton Custer's mid-range shot against Tennessee, Dante Ingram's three-pointer to win it against Miami, and Marcus Towns' corner 3 against Nevada to win that game, essentially. You guys were up 1, put you up 4. So out of those 3 shots, which one is the best shot of the tournament in your mind? Because in my mind, I would go with Ingram because who knows if that run doesn't happen if he doesn't make that shot. But I want to see your thoughts on it.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. I got to give credit to all of them, man. I love all those guys. Obviously worked with Clay last year. And excited for him beginning his coaching journey, and then Marcus and Dante still playing. But like you said, if Dante doesn't hit that shot, who knows what happens? And that shot was just legendary. I mean, the fact that it was like a buzzer beater. And I mean, you think about those moments, you grow up watching March Madness, and for, you to be a part of a program and for that to happen literally 5 feet in front of you. I mean, I blacked out for about 5 seconds. I ran halfway across, actually fully across the court when that happened. So.
Did you think it was going in?
Yes, I actually did. So our Dobo right now, London Dakobu, he was our video coordinator at the time. And so the possession before that, we knew that if Dante got the ball, he had such a belief in himself as a player. We knew that if he touched the ball, he was going to shoot it. And London came up to me like, man, we got to run something for Dante. Or don't run anything for Dante. Run something for Marcus or for Clay, because if Dante gets it, he's going to screw the play and just take a three right away. And then when he got the three in transition, when we were going with a couple seconds left, I knew, because of his belief and his work that he put in, he deserved to make the shot.
So your younger brother is Denzel Valentine, former college national player of the year. He went to Michigan State. I wanted to ask you a question about your guys' matchup with Michigan State early in the year. First, what was that like going against Tom Izzo? What did he have to say after the game? And secondly, who did Denzel Valentine root for in this game? Because was it his alma mater, or was he going with his brother's team?
Well, I mean, Coach Izzo's always been great. He's been a huge mentor of mine. Without him giving me the start in the coaching, profession, I don't know where I would be at today. So, a lot of respect for him. What he's been able to accomplish is just second to none. He's a Hall of Fame coach. He's a legend, and can't say enough great things about him as a basketball coach and as a person. So it was crazy to play against them, especially my first year being a head coach and in a big tournament like Battle for Atlantis. I mean, if I would have told you, 3 years ago I'd be a head coach at 30, coaching a team that's playing a Battle for Atlantis, and the first game being against Michigan State and Coach Izzo, I mean, that's pretty crazy to think about. So it's definitely a blessing, and I don't take it for granted. And then with my brother, man, he he wanted us to win, but obviously he wanted a great game because he wants to see Michigan State always do well, and he's super supportive of them. He was just actually at their game when they played here in Chicago against Northwestern. So he's a huge supporter and a great alum, and he takes a lot of pride in the program. But he had to go with his family on that one.
So how quickly did your guys' game against San Francisco really get into motion? Because you guys had several games canceled due to COVID-19. You guys had 2 games in the week prior canceled because of COVID protocols. So what was it? How did that whole conversation go?
Yeah, so when we got our game canceled against Southern Illinois on January 2nd, San Francisco reached out and let us know if we had any other cancellations later in the week that they would be open to playing on Wednesday or Thursday. We had our game canceled on Wednesday, and so we called them. Coach Todd Golden obviously was great throughout the process. He was really trying to get it done really aggressively, just like I was. And, we really put it together. I mean, we didn't find out until about 2 p.m. And then, I mean, we didn't know that what our travel plans were fully going to be until right before we left on Wednesday. So, I mean, it got put together soon. I got to give a shout out to Salt Lake Community College. They did a great job hosting the game, the game day prep, the game boards, the stat crew, tickets, all that. But it came together really quick in a matter of hours.
When Porter Moser left to take the head coaching job at Oklahoma, deep down, did you know that you were going to be the next head coach at Loyola Chicago? And how did that whole process go?
Yeah, I had a pretty good idea. When Coach Moser, was going throughout the process, he was keeping me kind of updated and, was telling me to do everything I could to put myself in a position to hopefully get the job. And then, obviously prior to that, 2 years ago, he almost, left to go to St. John's. And so when that happened, I started having conversations with our athletic director, Steve Watson, and, some other people around our university. And so I felt like I was confident. I felt like I was prepared. And I felt like they were kind of, viewing me as a future head coach for about 2 years prior to when Coach took the Oklahoma job. So I'm incredibly grateful that Coach signed off, that he gave his, obviously his blessing. And then I'm obviously super thankful and blessed that our administration, our athletic director, Steve Watson, that they had, faith and confidence in me to, continue with what we're building here. And I'm just really excited about the direction of this program.
The Ramblers currently have one of the more efficient offenses in college basketball, still good defensively, but it's kind of different. You guys are more on the offensive side this year. What makes this team different than Loyola Chicago teams of past years?
I think the biggest thing would probably be Cameron Krutwig. I mean, when you don't have a, point center, when you don't have an All-American, down there on the block, and on the perimeter, obviously he did a lot of his stuff on the perimeter in the high post area. It's just a little bit different how we're playing. We're playing more through our guards, and we're having them kind of initiate our offense more. And so, I think we've always had really good guards, really good players. I mean, and they're just getting an opportunity to have a bigger role right now. I think we've got a really good style of play that puts our players in position to be successful. And I think we've got a really unselfish group that believes and trusts. They buy into our style of play. They buy into taking efficient shots, and they buy into sharing the ball with one another. And so that's why I think we're having so much success. Not to mention that they're really good as well.
Yeah, wrapping it up here with one final question. I wanted to ask you about last year's NCAA tournament. You guys made it to the Sweet 16, but you guys were an 8 seed, despite you guys being ranked top 15 in KenPom, top 15 in the net. Did you guys feel like you guys were underseeded in the tournament last year?
100%. So, I mean, we just got to control what we can control. And that was kind of just our mindset going into the tournament. We kind of thought going into the tournament we weren't going to get the seed that our net ranking kind of showed, but it is what it is. You just got to control what you can control. And, we were thankful and really excited about just being there and getting a chance to compete. And so we made that our focus rather than just complaining about the seed that we got. I'd
like to thank Loyola Chicago head coach Drew Valentine for coming on the show this week. The Ramblers are the unanimous #1 team in the Field of 68 mid-major top 25 show once again, and we'll resume the show right after this. Thanks to Loyola Chicago head coach Drew Valentine once again for joining the show. And now we return with a little something I'm adding this week. We're going to do a transfer portal mid-major All-American team, 5 players. We agreed on 3 of them, so I'll say those 3 right now, and then we have 2 that were separate. All good players, of course, but there's just so many options because of how many players transferred. The 3 we had in common were Cameron Holden from Kosan, who I have as a conference CAA player of the year right now, coming in from UT Martin, averaging just shy of a double-double. He's been fantastic. And Towson currently looks like the favorite in the CAA, and he's a big reason why. Jamal Kane, another player on another team that didn't have a ton of expectations entering the season, a 4-year player at Marquette coming in, now averaging 20 and 10 for Oakland, picked 6 in the Horizon League preseason poll. They're currently the best team in the Horizon League right now, right now it looks like. And then after that, the other one we agreed on was another transfer, Quest Glover. Began his career at Florida, played a couple seasons there, never played a huge role with guys like Trey Mann leading the show and Andrew Nemhard for Glover's first season. Glover now, though, coming over to Samford, where he's averaging 19 points per game, 4 assists per game, and making a really competitive team out of the Samford Bulldogs. They're a tough team because of the pace they play, how tough they play. They're a really good team, and Quest Glover is one of the best guards in the country so far. And, we'll see what happens, but he's going to be a first-teamer on the All-SoCon team for sure. But of our 2 separate picks, who's your first that we didn't have in common?
Yeah, so I got to start off, Sean, with our guy, Johan Masalski here in San Francisco. I would be remiss if I didn't mention him because he is such an X factor when I think about San Francisco now versus the last couple of years when they've been really, really close to being a good team to close to tournament team to now, like, okay, with Masalski and some of the other pieces they've added, he makes all the difference in the world. Plus, if you look at the metrics and all the other things, I think he's like in KenPom #2 in the WCC, most efficient player. And I think, Masalski was always there at San Diego, just didn't have as much talent around him and, kind of went unheralded. And I think the staff here for the Dons, they when they brought in key transfers, they went with guys they knew. They went with, what you would call calculated risk. And they made a calculated risk on Masalski. They knew exactly what they were getting from an in-conference foe coming from San Diego Toreros. And they also grabbed, Gabe Stefanini from Columbia, where Kyle Smith used to coach. So they knew exactly what they're getting in him too. And I just think Masalski, from a basketball standpoint, he is, he is freeing a lot of things up for Bouye and Shabazz as the star guards. He takes a lot of attention away from them on the defensive end. He also is a matchup nightmare. If I was at the Loyola Chicago game last week, and Loyola Chicago only had basically one big to match up with both Masalski and Tape, or when Kunin came in, and they just kept rotating. They always kept 2 bigs in there, and it's a matchup nightmare. And it throws things off balance for the defense to how do they account for this guy. And I think really the only thing Masalski's got to work on is his foul shooting. In the loss to Grand Canyon, 1 point brutal 49-48 loss. He shot 4 for 11 from the line. But he's got to just keep working on that. I talked to Todd Golden about it. It's a work in progress. outside of that, he's getting tons of boards, scoring tons of points. And San Francisco has got so much balance and depth now that, like, whatever the defense wants to do, they don't care. It's like Masalski can go off, Bouye can go off, so could Shabazz or Stefanini. So it's really like, without Masalski, that doesn't exist. And he's kind of just become that glue and a really, really key part of this story.
That's a great call, because last year, San Francisco, it was clear that they lacked a true 5-man, a true back to the basket player. They had 5 guys on the floor that could shoot at all times, but they didn't have that guy that could dump it down to and go get a bucket inside. Masalski is exactly that guy. But a guy I'm going to pinpoint here, another transfer, of course, because this is a transfer list, is Aaron Estrada. He's coming over from Oregon, and he started his career at St. Peter's, but he's having a big-time season for Hofstra. 14 a game, 6 rebounds per game, 5 assists per game. He's just filling up the stat sheet every single game, running the point and being able to set up shooters like Zach Cooks, like Jalen Ray, like Darlin Stone Dubar. So they have a lot going on there at Hofstra. They play a really fun style of basketball. They're not a team I'd want to face in the NCAA tournament. Aaron Estrada has been a big-time player for them. But now getting to your 5th player, who do you have as your 5th guy?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with EJ Anoski out of Cal State Fullerton, staying here in California. It was a tough one, Sean. I had a list of about 15 guys, and I went with him as a tiebreaker. I got to see him in person on opening night against San Jose, a game that came down to the wire. The one thing about Anoski, he's a transfer from Tennessee, didn't quite cut it at the SEC level, but was really, really great for Sacred Heart before that in the NEC. He's fit in really well into Dietrich Taylor's team. He's the horse. You look at his efficiency metrics, he's off the charts in pretty much every category. When you see him on the court, he's just a relentless bulldog, getting rebounds, finding all these different creative ways to finish. He's got a little hook shot. He's got, he can go right, left. He dunks. He's 6'7". He's kind of like, I should have a better example, but kind of like a Charles Barkley mentality on the court. And it's just really fun to watch how big of a warrior he is. The game I saw, he was in foul trouble, knew he couldn't foul. And he somehow, just with his athleticism and build, was able to avoid fouling and continue to be productive, both defensively and offensively. And I think the way the Big West is shaping up, Riverside just got blown out by Irvine. Somebody's got to challenge Irvine. I think this Fullerton team, even in their losses, they've been really competitive for the most part. They lost to Wyoming by 13. That's the only one that really got away from them. So we haven't been able to see what they're going to be like when they play Irvine. But I do think they're feisty enough. And with a guy like this, it makes everybody around him it's contagious, that attitude. And I just say, keep your eye on the Titans, because they're not going away quietly. They've got some fight because of Anoski. Yeah,
I agree with that. And then the Maddox brothers, that's a really good duo to have along with EJ and Asicki inside. That's a really good duo to have. And they're going to be a competitive team in the Big West, like you said. And my final pick here is going to be another SEC transfer. That's Charles Manning Jr. Began his career at the JUCO level, spent 2 years at LSU, was a midseason transfer last year, and goes to the transfer portal heavy South Alabama Jaguars team led by Richie Riley. He's been running the point a lot of the year because of injuries. He's not a true point guard, but he's done a really solid job. 17 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, 3 assists per game. He just knows how to get buckets. And when you need a big bucket late, Charles Manning's a guy. He's probably one of the front runners for Conference Player of the Year right now. And South Alabama, they're the most talented team in that conference just because of the amount of guys they have from the high major level. I don't know if they'll win the league because of how unpredictable the Sun Belt is, but they could definitely win the league, and Charles Manning could put on a show in the NCAA tournament. We'll see what happens, but the Jaguars and Charles Manning are certainly a team to keep an eye on. And let's just lead into our games of the week. What's your game of the week this week, Rocco?
Well, I'm going to have to go with San Francisco hosting BYU this Saturday. The main reason is, San Francisco, when they play these top 3 teams, when I say the top 3, I mean Gonzaga, BYU, and St. Mary's here in the WCC. It's basically going to be their chance to prove themselves as a bona fide tournament team, and especially at home. They got to protect their home court. The challenge here is BYU's week, who we don't talk about mid-major, but their week really sets up for this to be a showdown because they got to go to Gonzaga Thursday. So if you presume that BYU goes down in that game, which, I'm sure the odds will be they lose by double figures, they're really focusing on San Francisco this week to get their split. And the Dons got to be ready because they're going to get BYU's best effort. And I think that's going to – and I've been to these BYU San Francisco games before. I'll try to go this week as well. And it's always a great showdown with the shooters on the floor. Barcelo will get his, and Mark Pope's strategy, without Baxter, is constantly shifting. He threw a lot of crazy defenses at St. Mary's last Saturday. So the Dons got to really be prepared for that. And I just think it's going to be a great game. It'll probably come down to the last minute.
Yeah, my pick is a game I expect to be very close also. 1-2 in the Horizon League. Oakland, the underdog in the Horizon League, coming against Cleveland State, who won the league last year. Dennis Gates' team plays with a ton of toughness. They had a tough road game yesterday. They were able to win that against Youngstown State going to overtime. Demoy Hodge dropped 31 points. When he gets going, he can be one of the best scorers in the league. And obviously, Jamal Cannon, Jalen Moore, who had a double-double in the first 10 minutes of the game yesterday against Milwaukee. So that is a must-watch game because those teams, they're definitely the two teams to beat in the Horizon League at this point. And I really don't have a feel on how that game's going to go because both teams are really good. So I would just say watch and we'll find out what happens. But then going into the upset of the week here to round out the show, what do you have as your upset of the week?
Glad you said that, Sean, too, because Cleveland State's just tenacious defensively, and Oakland's got the awesome offense. So it's going to be so cool to see that matchup. Yeah. So for the upset of the week, I'm going to go with the team that a lot of people probably have written off. Perhaps they've lost 5 in a row right now. It's the Colgate Raiders, and Colgate, they've been a little less than full strength coming off pause. That's the tricky part about predicting games right now, is all these rosters are constantly in flux. But assuming with a week gone by the time they play Navy this weekend, they'll be back to full strength. They're going to Navy on the road. Now, let me just take you back to last year. The Patriot League was a 2-horse race with these undefeated teams, both Colgate and Navy. Never, in the way with the COVID schedule, they broke up the league. They never played each other. Then in the league tournament, Navy gets upset by Loyola, Maryland, and they never played. So Colgate runs away with the bid. They go, play Arkansas. That was fun. And now we're here to this year. So these two teams, a lot of players back from last year, they've probably had this circle for over a year to finally get to play each other. And we all know if Colgate gets hot from deep, they can beat anybody. Just ask Syracuse. And so this is a team that, like, if you're ever looking for an upset, just pick Colgate. So I'm going with Colgate at Navy on the road.
The Patriot League's fun this year, too. I like Boston University a lot also. They almost won at Florida State earlier in the year. Javante McCoy. They have Mathon down low. And then they have just a senior-laden 5-man rotation there in the starting lineup. All our seniors, all were on that team that won the Patriot League tournament a few years ago. But obviously, COVID canceled the tournament, so they didn't end up playing in it. But maybe they can this year. But my upset of the week isn't between two teams that are going to play in the NCAA tournament. They're near the bottom of the WCC. But I have Portland going on the road to beat Pepperdine. Pepperdine, I like what they have going on in the future. I like Houston Millett. I like Mike Mitchell. I like Max Lewis. That's a really good trio of freshmen. But again, they're freshmen, so there's some up and downs there. And then when you look at Portland, Shante Leggins is a great coach coming over from Eastern Washington. That Portland Pilots roster shoots a ton of threes, and I think they'll be able to knock off Pepperdine on the road because it's just, even though Portland hasn't played together a ton, they're really experienced while Pepperdine's really inexperienced. So I think that'll be a big factor here. What do you think? Because you're a big WCC guy too.
I like the pick. The matchup will be interesting because Pepperdine can get away from you when they're making shots, but Portland will muck it up a little bit and throw a lot of different zones. They've got experience. 3 of their starters came with Shante from Eastern. And, I was one of the only people I saw that picked Portland above 10th. I picked them 9th. And I thought Pacific would be 10th. So far, it's looking like that could happen, but we have a lot of games to see. But I do think, Portland, as you mentioned, they've already got 9 wins. Regardless of competition, that's for Portland basketball, that's a huge deal. And I just think they're going to be one of those teams, especially under Shante. They're going to just continue to get better and better week over week over week, all the way till March. And maybe by the time we get to WCC tournament, they'll get that first game win, and that'll be a big springboard for the program. So if it's not this week, it's going to happen. So that'll wrap it
up for this week's edition of the Field of 68 Mid-Major Top 25 show. Make sure to follow the Field of 68 on Twitter. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube. Follow Rocco Miller on Twitter. Follow myself on Twitter. And see you next week.